South African Health Products Regulatory Authority has registered the Chinese-made COVID-19 vaccine called SINOPHARM for use in adults over the age of 18 in South Africa. SAHPRA says the authorization is based on acceptable safety, quality and efficacy data submitted by Pfizer laboratories to them. To speak more on this with Editor-in-Chief of Bekisisa Center for Health Journalism, Mia Malan. Mia, always a pleasure. So what is the difference about the approval of these vaccines to others?
So that's a great question, because this vaccine got market authorization, which means it's registered, it's fully registered, as compared to the other COVID vaccines that initially only got emergency authorization, which meant they weren't really registered. They were just allowed to be used during an emergency period. They were approved for use. Now, the reason there's a difference in the registration is that you need more data to get market authorization. And because the vaccines were still so new, like Pfizer and when it was registered, when it was got emergency authorization, there wasn't yet enough data available to give it market authorization. But that has now changed. Pfizer has also received market authorization, as did SINOPHARM, because it had enough data. So the difference between the two is that when you have emergency authorization, there's generally a cap on the quantity of vaccines that you allow to bring into the country. If it's market authorization, you can bring in as many as is needed. And market authorization also allows for off-label use. That means you can use the product, in this case the vaccine, for something it hasn't been registered for. And in the case of vaccines, that means mix and match. In other words, a vaccine is registered, say, for 2 doses of Pfizer, and then you're going to take a third Pfizer dose for a booster. But if it's off-label use, you can also look at a policy decision around maybe a different booster after that vaccine that you've received, so not the same brand.
And how do they work in comparison to other vaccines?
So SINOPHARM is a vaccine that works in a different way than Pfizer, which is an mRNA vaccine, and also the other vaccine that we have in South Africa, J&J, which is a viral vector vaccine. SINOPHARM is an inactivated vaccine, and that means that it uses a small bit of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that's the virus that causes COVID-19, which is inactivated or killed. So the genetic material has been killed and it can't make you sick because it can't replicate. And then when that is injected into your body, you respond by producing antibodies that can fight those small bits, so that you are prepared when you get infected with a virus, that you have antibodies that you can manufacture very quickly.
There's a possibility to mix vaccines that these vaccines allow for. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
So in December, SAHPRA, our regulator, approved a J&J booster after a Pfizer vaccine. So you can get 2 Pfizer shots and then boost it with J&J. But just because SAHPRA approved that doesn't mean that the health department has to do that. It can make its own policy decision as to whether it wanted to do it or not. At that time, the health department said, we're not yet going to mix and match, so use a different booster than the vaccine that you originally received. And the booster that people in South Africa spoke a lot about, because there's data that shows if you use a Pfizer booster after a J&J vaccine, that the response is often better than if you take a J&J booster after a J&J vaccine. Now, that was not approved by SAHPRA at the time because Pfizer never applied for approval. But now that Pfizer has market authorization, which allows for off-label use, it means that the health department can make a policy decision to do this without SAHPRA approval. And on Friday, the health department said that it's looking into this and it's expecting an advisory from the Ministerial Advisory Committee on vaccines around about this week, and will then study it and make a decision after that. But the Deputy Director General, Nicholas Christ, who runs the vaccine program, on Friday sounded very positive that we would be able to, in the coming months, get approval for a Pfizer booster after a J&J vaccine. In other words, by approval, I mean a policy decision that the health department makes.
Right. Any other vaccines that we should be on the lookout for?
So the other vaccines that have applied for approval with SAHPRA is Novavax and also Sputnik and Sputnik Light. So Sputnik is a Russian vaccine. The first time that they applied for approval, it was not approved. But that approval process is ongoing. Sputnik Light is the same vaccine, but just one jab of it. Sputnik consists of 2 jabs. And then there's also Novavax that we haven't had an outcome on. And in the case of SINOPHARM, the interesting thing is that more than one local company can apply for approval for a vaccine. So in the case of SINOPHARM, 2 local companies have applied. So SAHPRA doesn't allow international companies to apply directly for approval. They have to partner with a local company. And in the case of this approval that we now have, they partnered with a company called MC Pharma, but there's another SINOPHARM application that has not yet been approved that has been submitted by a different local pharmaceutical company.
Mia Malan, thank you very much for helping us make sense of all of that. She's the editor-in-chief of the Bekisisa Center for Health Journalism, I beg your pardon.